Our consultant team is going to give an introduction to what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Hi, my name is Chris Floyd. I'm the project manager for the new Bern Station Area Plans. I'm with Stantec Consulting. I'm based out of Montreal, but been here for a few days now. Been here for the last few months. I want to thank you for coming out tonight. I just want to give a quick overview of what the station area plans are and what we'll be talking about tonight. As many of you probably know, we have some workshops coming up. The first one for the Western stations, what we call Western stations, on the BRT line, starting Monday next week. And we'll have additional workshops for the middle and the eastern stations of the BRT line the week of October 4th. I just want to reiterate a few things here that this plan is really to set a few things in motion and understanding how change will happen across the corridor as the BRT is installed and development continues to come into the downtown area and along these corridors across the city. And this is not just the only corridor that's going to see this change. There are multiple corridors that will see this as well. So it's the first of many changes across the city. But the station area planning process is looking to improve the public health and wellness opportunities across the corridors, finding ways to help mitigate climate change by creating more compact, walkable urban environments, addressing long-term housing affordability, which is why we're here tonight to talk about those issues, looking at ways to welcome new people to New Bern Avenue while ensuring providing the opportunity for existing residents to live, work, and play in place. And providing solutions to help improve mobility choice. And the BRT is part of that, but also walking and biking components is that. Not that the car is not the only option, but we're trying to create more options along the corridor. For tonight, we're trying to create some expectations of what affordable housing means. And what we're really looking at is trying to better communicate in Raleigh the persistent issue of pressures on affordable housing in our communities. So we want to use this time to tackle those issues and talk about how it's evolving across the corridor. We see this as much more complex than just a generational shift or a change in housing preference. We see this as a continued pressure of housing is more expensive. Where people want to live is more compact and vibrant, and that comes with an economic consideration as well. But we don't want to really displace people at the same time. We want to use this time to understand the tools and the approaches to implement affordable housing on the corridor and define what affordable housing really means for this area. But lastly, our goal is really to look at the future, that in 20 years from now, 2040 and beyond, that we're keeping the same amount of affordable housing supply consistently or growing it moderately along with the growth along the corridor. And so that we're setting the stage to make sure that it's not just one type of housing, type of people, but it's providing that true mix of community that creates these walkable, vibrant neighborhoods that we're all striving to have. So with that, we're going to start that conversation tonight. I do welcome you to ask questions. There's no wrong answer, no wrong questions here. This is an open dialogue, and this is the first of many conversations we're going to have on the next slide. So I thank you for attending. With that, Jason, I can turn it over to you.
Thank you, Craig. And so my name is Jason Harden. I'm a planner with the city's Planning and Development Department. And I'm joined here on stage with a great panel who I think is going to provide a lot of information about housing and housing affordability. We have cities have from HRNA housing with us. And so also for those who are in person, I'll mention that we're going to go through a panel discussion and then we're going to have a community conversation with y'all in the room. We also have some people who will be having a conversation online. So this will be an opportunity to both hear what we've learned about what's been happening, what is driving the affordability issue along this corridor and elsewhere at Raleigh, and what are some of the things we can do about it, and what are your goals and visions for the area. So we'll get to the panel discussion, but first Kyle is going to give us an update on what we found as far as current conditions for housing along the corridor.
Thank you, Jason. So I'm going to talk through a set of slides that really help set the context for affordable housing on New Bern Ave, as well as citywide, and really talk about the challenges that exist and start to hopefully point towards solutions that can be developed. Or if we could go to the next slide. So first, I think we just want to situate the affordable housing challenge using some nationwide statistics. So, up here we can see, in terms of Raleigh's population growth, home value growth, median growth rate, over the past decade, Raleigh has greatly exceeded the national. Every day we see statistics like those on the right, highlighting that Raleigh is the second fastest growing metro in the entire country in terms of large metros after only Austin. So this is a region that is experiencing rapid growth, and with that has come affordability pressures and challenges. We go to the next slide. So we recognize that also the city and Wake County has been proactive in terms of developing solutions for affordable housing. Whether it is, most notably the affordable housing bond that was passed by the voters last fall, whether it was the county developing a Wake affordable housing strategy a few years ago that our firm helped the county develop, and dedicating, sort of significant financial resources to particular affordable housing programs. The city and the county are trying to be proactive. And this process is about infusing a lens of affordable housing and equity into the station area planning process for New Bern, being very thoughtful and intelligent about how these tools and how these resources and strategies that are being created can be implemented on this board. Go to the next slide. So one of the ways that the city has really been proactive and really been a leader in a national context was 2 years ago developing the Equitable Transit-Oriented Development Guidebook, which is really looking at, laying out a series of policies, tools, and strategies that can be used to encourage equitable development and try to ensure that as transit is implemented, which will, be a great amenity for people that live in these areas, will offer access to services, to jobs, to destinations within the city and region, starting with the New Bern corridor, that there be strategies in place so that as the transit is implemented and as it creates value in the local area, that the residents of these corridors are not displaced and priced out by the transit investment. And we've seen that happen in other cities around the country. And Raleigh has really been a leader at the outset of this process, determining that it would have an equitable transit-oriented development strategy and put in place intentional policies and programs in order to make sure that this is mitigated in the city here. So if we, sorry, so we want to, start to sort of define what does affordable housing mean. And there are two primary types of affordable housing that we want to talk about tonight. There is housing which is not sort of formally regulated or subsidized by the government, but which has rents that are considered, quote, naturally occurring affordable housing because those rents tend to be more affordable to the median household in the region. So this is, a term for this naturally occurring affordable housing in the industry is NOAA. And NOAA units tend to be those that are less expensive. They tend to be older units. They tend to need, some sort of rehabilitation. And they are, even though the term is naturally occurring, that isn't, there's no natural process that necessarily means that a city will have a large swath of housing that is available just by the market rents. So what has happened in a lot of cities where there is rapid demand, where there is, sort of price appreciation that is from that, is that you see that rents get pushed up substantially, and housing that used to be affordable to, to the median household in the region no longer is. And that's what we're starting to see in Raleigh and on this corridor. And we have some statistics to show you that in a moment. We go to the next slide. So in the region as a whole, for the sort of median household size in the region, which is just over 2 people, so there are a lot of sort of 1-person households, 2-person households. Of course, there are some larger households. The median in the region is 2 people. And the rent that is affordable to that median household, based upon the formulas used to determine housing affordability, it's usually under the standard that a household is not spending more than 30% of their before tax income on housing, that median affordable unit in price is $1,500. Now, that price, while it is based on a median regional standard, Wake County is a very sort of high income county in the context of the nation. So the median, the median rent that is affordable along this corridor to households that actually live on this corridor is actually less than. So if we go to the next slide. So this slide has a lot going on, but I'll try to sort of distill it for folks. Basically, what we did was try to group on the bottom different buckets of rental affordability. And looking at household sort of housing units in 2010, and then again, based upon the most recent data in 2019, and what did those housing units rent at? What we've seen is that, so on the left, we have units that rent below $1,000. And we think that $1,000, based upon our calculations, is more applicable than $1,500 in terms of the median rent that is affordable to households that currently live on the corridor. There has been a huge decrease in the number of units that rent below $1,000. There has been a significant increase in the number of units that are renting above $1,000 and even above $1,500. Whereas there were virtually no household housing units that that were at those levels a decade ago. There are a significant number of housing units that are renting at that level today. And so overall, we calculate that in 2019, 74% of units on this corridor met the regional definition of being naturally occurring affordable housing. But 94% did in 2010, according to what would have been the definition at that time, which is lower than $1,500 due to inflation, about $1,250 at that point. So there has been this process, this loss of naturally occurring affordable housing, we very much see playing out over the past decade on this corridor. If we go to the next slide. Then there's also dedicated affordable housing. This is housing that is formally subsidized with rents that are regulated and kept at certain benchmarks so that they are affordable to populations who need this type of housing. Based upon an inventory and survey that we did, 37% of the units, housing units along this corridor, close proximity to New Bern Avenue, are using some form of service. And examples of those programs are in the yellow box on the right-hand side of this slide, include low-income housing tax credit, housing, sort of public housing that is managed by the Raleigh Housing Authority, Section 8 rental assistance housing, and other deed-restricted affordable housing. So there are a variety of ways this housing can be subsidized, and a significant portion of the units on the corridor are falling into this bucket. Go to the next slide. We wanted to just sort of show then where these subsidized units are. And so we created this map, which is showing sort of a heat map of the number of units. And you really see that the vast majority of them are sort of closer to downtown, inside the Beltline, with some really significant large projects, including Washington Terrace, including the Sunnybrook Point Apartments. And there are a significant number of additional projects in the pipeline that are being made possible through, sort of dedicated resources for affordable housing. They include Newburgh Crossing, the Milner Commons development, and more recently, the city's investment across the street from that in the Duplex Village site, which is going to be an innovative development programming that is combining affordable units on a portion of the site with other sort of development that's being implemented by another developer. So there is, a significant pipeline of affordable units coming to the neighborhood corridor, continue to provide housing opportunities. Go to the next slide.
Just pointing yourself that way whenever you can. Thank you.
In terms of the development activity that's occurring on the corridor, we also want to highlight single-family housing trends and prices. This is just showing sort of a heat map of building permits, development activity that is occurring in the corridor. Again, in recent years, the vast majority of this activity has been inside the Beltline. This includes new houses, additions, significant rehabilitations. If we go to the next slide. So in order to sort of understand how this corridor, in terms of that housing price appreciation, compares to the city as a whole and the region as a whole, what we did was compare sort of over the past decade, what has the housing price trend looked like on the corridor? What we found is that, in the region as a whole, there has been significant price appreciation. 58% growth in housing prices over the past decade. In the zip code that comprises the majority of the corridor, 27610, there has been 79% appreciation, so outpacing the rest of the region. In the zip code that is closest to downtown, 27601, there has been 95% growth in housing prices. So significantly outpacing this, the region as a whole, almost double that experienced in the city, in the region as a whole. So when we talk about this issue that is a citywide issue, it's a region-wide issue, we see that it is particularly acute on this corridor. Go to the next slide. And this ultimately means that there is a growing affordability gap that we see existing in real time on, in terms of the corridor, where in 2016, when we look at the median sales price based upon data from a national housing provider, that median sales price was $203,000. Today, in 2019, just a couple of years later, that had significantly increased to $280,000. And what that means is that median, that median home is no longer affordable to key resident groups along the corridor. The median, based upon the median household income of Black households on the corridor, that their median income cannot afford that median sales price. This is also true for Latinx households on the corridor. And it is especially true for any households on the corridor that are headed by someone that whose highest level of educational attainment is a high school degree. There is a very significant affordability gap between their earnings and the median sales price of a home on the corridor. So I think these statistics further place this issue into context and really highlight how it has accelerated in recent years. We go to the next slide. We also want to note that a key concern another key concern, even if someone is not in the market for housing, is settled, perhaps even owns their home without a mortgage, is the increasing, property tax burden that can be imposed by accelerating home prices and values that, that ultimately turn into higher appraised values for homes. There has been, recent revaluation in Wake County resulted in significantly, sort of higher tax bills. This can be a huge cost burden for folks that are on a fixed income in particular, for seniors, for many families in corridors like the New Bern corridor that have seen the highest appreciation in recent years. So this is another issue of the, dimension of the affordability challenge we want to be mindful of. And the next slide is the final one I just wanted to highlight. Is that, there are a variety of pressures that exist on sort of different communities in the corridor. These include things like predatory purchase offers, where, purchases are being encouraged and made at values that are not keeping up with the significant market appreciation. There are a variety of, there's a variety of issues around rising prices, bidding wars, folks coming in to work in growing tech industries that, are coming from places where home values are higher. So if they sell a home in that metro area and move here, they are able to afford, significantly more in some cases than folks that have lived in this area historically. So there are a variety of pressures that exist here. We want to be mindful of these different problems because they require unique solutions, and we want to talk about these unique solutions in this process, starting with the panel. So that's the end of the presentation, and we can.
Thank you, Kyle. So I have some questions that I want to put to our panel before we break into our community discussion. But first, I think it would be helpful. We heard from Kyle, but just a little introduction from Natalie, you and Lamont, what your role in the housing community is and some of the things that you've worked on.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Natalie Britt, and I'm Vice President for Real Estate Development at DHIC. I've been there, believe it or not, 25 years. I had my 25-year anniversary last week, which is kind of hard to say out loud, maybe. But so over the years, DHIC has been a big developer of affordable housing in Raleigh and throughout the Triangle area. In particular, in this area we're speaking of now, we are the developer of the Washington Terrace redevelopment there. And we are also working on the Milner Commons senior housing development right at King Charles and New Bern Avenue. So we have a history of already having a presence in the area, and we are a nonprofit, and our whole goal is to keep properties affordable for the long term. We're based in the community, and that's our mission for long-term affordability. We're not just a flash in the pan kind of organization. So we also do first-time homebuyer education through our homeownership center. So we partner with the city on down payment assistance and homebuyer education as well. So we don't really produce single-family homes for sale, but we do the education piece to help people become responsible homeowners and get into good loan products. That's just a little bit about some of the things that we do.
Thank you, Natalie. I think we're lucky in the city of Raleigh to have DHIC as a major player in the housing space. So thank you, and thanks for being here. Lamont?
Hi, I'm Lamont Taylor, Community and Economic Development Administrator in Housing and Neighborhoods with the city. I've only been at the city for a very short time. I believe my 10-month anniversary is coming up in a couple of days. But prior to coming to Raleigh, and I'll share a little bit more about my role in Raleigh, but prior to coming to Raleigh, I worked for 7 years in the Neighborhood Development Department at the city of Greensboro. And then before that, 14 years in various roles at the city of Durham. So I'm about a 23-year veteran of local government in North Carolina in 3 cities. To give you a little bit of insight into what we do in housing and neighborhoods, we're comprised of 3 operate divisions. one of which I lead, and it is Community and Economic Development, and it became Community and Economic Development on July 1st. We had a reorganization at the city, and so the former Office of Economic Development and Innovation was merged in with Community Development. So we are a combined team now. But we also have a division for code enforcement and the newly named and branded division called Neighborhood Enrichment Services. So through those three divisions, as their names would imply, we provide a lot of services really around housing, neighborhood enrichment, and neighborhood development. In that, we also provide funding for a wide variety of community enrichment activities. Homelessness prevention is one of those. I don't think I've worked at a city that actually dedicates as much local funding to that cause as the city of Raleigh. We have a homeownership program. We provide down payment assistance to first-time homebuyers who are at or below 80% of area median income, working with DHIC with their home buyer education program, their assistance with getting buyers ready to buy. So we have a great partnership there. Of course, we also provide gap financing for typically low-income housing tax credit projects in the city. So we have a team that works on that. We also do construction of single-family houses in some of our redevelopment areas, most notably East College Park. And last, and certainly not least, we are now, our team is also working on economic development initiatives, promoting small business development throughout the city, working with 12 local Raleigh business alliances, if you will, to promote those activities, workforce development, as well as other economic development activities.
Well, thank you. A lot of expertise up here on this panel and a lot of affordable housing units that have been produced from the work that y'all have all been involved in. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into some questions. The city has started to do some work in this space and thinking about, as we plan around the bus rapid transit investment that the community that Wake County has decided to make, we thought about how do we take advantage of that investment to the maximum extent possible. And what we've heard is it's really important to grow more around transit in the future than in the past. We were a community that grew more around driving. So part of it is thinking about simply more opportunities for people to work and live in areas certified for bus rapid transit. But a really essential part of it is making sure that that benefit is shared equitably. And we take that to mean that residents of all income levels and current residents are able to access this transit investment. And so some of the work that the city has done has involved putting together a general plan for how we can achieve those two goals. And we now have the additional resources of the affordable housing bond that the voters of Raleigh passed last year and provides us with some real financial tools, financial muscle to put some of those recommendations in place. So some of the earlier work thought about a variety of tools, including acquiring land right along the corridor near bus rapid transit stations, additional funds for homeowner rehabilitation assistance, down payment assistance. Which of those tools do you think would be among the most useful for ensuring that we have some affordability along New Bern Avenue in the future?
So in the context of naturally affordable housing and the preservation of that, our substantial rehab and limited repair programs are key to preservation of homeownership units. In an area of rising housing costs, as you mentioned, we've got lots of elderly folks, or soon to be elderly. And you mentioned the demographics around education and income earning potential. And so it becomes very important that we have very good and robust programs to serve those populations so that they can retain homeownership and really extend the affordability of those units long term. Related to that, the creation of homeownership opportunities. You mentioned in your slides that I believe there is was it 58%, and don't quote me on the percentage, but there's development happening, and has been happening over the years, and so it's very important to create homeownership opportunities through partnerships like ours with DHIC. We provide the funding for down payment assistance, and you provide the tools for folks to become successful in homeownership. And then last, we have a great tool, and that's funding to do acquisition around transit. In fact, 20 million, 16 million of the $80 million housing bond, or 20%, is allocated for just that purpose. And so that's a very effective tool. It's costly, but a good tool because that gives us long-term control of affordable housing. You mentioned legally binding affordable housing. It gives us some opportunities there to expand those before the market takes all the land. And then last, with that funding, we are in negotiation for a partnership with Wake County to stand up an acquisition preservation fund with a fund administrator. And back in the summer, we issued a joint RFP. It might have been an RFQ, but
a participant has joined the meeting.
A fund administrator, and so I believe the team is in the final stages of making a recommendation, a selection recommendation, and that should be announced here in the next few weeks.
That's great to hear. Natalie, Kyle, do y'all have some thoughts on that same topic?
Well, I think I would just agree with Lamont, especially on the importance of land acquisition, because it enables the city to sort of control its own destiny in terms of creating affordable units and creating affordable housing. You know, as fast as land values and prices have risen in Raleigh, you know, they are not yet at sort of a ceiling of what is theoretically possible. We see other markets that are similar to Raleigh, like Austin and Nashville, two other cities I'm working in right now, where the problem has gotten even worse. And where, you know, affordability is a really big concern. When a city like Raleigh owns the land, you know, they can really, you know, sort of decide to release it to the market with stipulations, with requirements for providing affordable housing. In fact, I've been working with the city of Durham recently on a project in downtown Durham where it is city-owned land. It's 4 acres. It's a great site. And the city has made a firm commitment that the development of that site will include 80 units of affordable housing, affordable at 60% of area median income. And they're able to do that and require that because they own the land. So I think that that's a really important tool, like you're saying, Lamont. And I also highlight, you know, one of the things that's included in the equitable development around transit guidebook is the notion of creating an equity, which is sort of the city being able to capture and dedicate a portion of the tax revenues generated by these rising prices, and to dedicate that to things like affordable housing or other community benefits, to sort of reinvest directly in the community. I think it's a very powerful tool and idea that, as it's being developed as part of this equitable transit-oriented development planning, is something that can really, again, you know, be a national model where Raleigh is really being a leader in this.
I think as far as the DHIC's typical work goes, again, just echoing the land acquisition and how extremely important that is. That's, the hardest thing that we do pretty much in putting developments together is a location. And if you can tie up the location, that really starts, that makes things so much easier as a nonprofit developer. Having a partner like the city take that first step is really helpful. And they've done that in the past with us and helped us out either from acquisition financing or actually owning the land and having a long-term land lease with us. We did that on some earlier projects. And I would encourage the city and the county to also, once the fund is kind of up and running, one thing that I'm just kind of wonder in Raleigh is where are our corporate partners? Where are all the companies that are bringing all these jobs, high-paying jobs, and more people into the area? How can we tap into the kind of corporate business community to help us better solve this problem? So I'm hoping that maybe at some point, once the fund's up and running, if there's any way to kind of shake down some Red Hats, some Googles, some Apples, to try to help us solve this problem that's partially their fault in a way.
Thank you, Natalie. I think we have seen more of that corporate contribution in Charlotte and some other cities, not so much in Raleigh yet. So maybe it's time to have those conversations with some of our corporate friends about how we can all partner on this issue. So the next question I have is, one of the big ideas that came out of the equitable development around transit planning, where we started to think about these questions, was the idea of a big trade. And a trade that would both allow more people to live and work near transit, but also ensure that we have some dedicated, long-lasting, affordable housing units. And the form that that's starting to take shape in is a density bonus. And that is currently pending. We'll be going before the city council in the next few weeks. But the shape of that is for a project that provides a certain percentage of deeply affordable housing units, they would receive a 50% height bonus. So you provide the affordability and you gain the right to build a little bit taller along this corridor. And just for context, nearly everything along New Bern Avenue outside of downtown is zoned for 3 stories. So pretty in the context of Raleigh and in the context of a corridor where you have high levels of transit, not a great deal of height. So this would allow some additional height, again, in exchange for that affordability. The big question is, to what extent would that be used by either nonprofit or for-profit developers? So my question here is, how well do you see this potentially supporting the production of affordable housing along the New Bern Avenue corridor?
Well, so Jason, my firm HRNA, we helped the city sort of think through and calibrate this policy. So, we're very hopeful that it will be utilized and that it is, calibrated to produce affordable housing units. And I think with a density bonus policy like this, that calibration and sort of matching the market is really important. We've seen some examples, in this state, around the country, of similar programs sort of succeed or fail depending on how well calibrated they are. So for instance, Winston-Salem has had a similar program in some ways, conceptually similar, a density bonus in exchange for providing a significant number of affordable housing units. It's been on the books for decades in Winston-Salem and has produced, sort of very, very few units in terms of producing results. There are other cities around the country that have more recently implemented programs, for instance, like Atlanta, that are starting to see, they sort of calibrated them with more measured requirements, really, trying to create a program that's going to be well utilized, because if no one chooses to use the program, then, the affordable units don't get created. So this program in Raleigh is really meant to, to appeal to, developers who are accustomed to delivering and building, sort of mid-rise apartment buildings, 4- and 5-story apartment buildings that have been built downtown, other nodes within the city. It's meant to really, sort of along this corridor as the market is continuing to focus here, to require that in order to build at that density, affordable units will be created, that 20%, the policy that's pending now, 20% of those units that are a portion of the height bonus, would be affordable, at 60% of area median income, which is, I think, a policy that is well aligned with national precedents. Those units would be affordable in the long term, 30 years. So again, I think that, Raleigh has been really sensitive about trying to design a policy that works well, and that encourages developers, if they want to build more densely along this corridor, to provide those affordable units.
Thank you. Natalie, Lamont, do y'all have some thoughts as well?
I think that sort of bonus or density bonus is probably more attractive to market rate developers, since the main way that we produce affordable housing, really the main way to produce rental housing, affordable rental housing now at all, is through the low-income housing tax credit program, and we're already limited with that program a little bit on number of units and some other restrictions. So I don't know if that's something that we would necessarily use, but I think, the more units we can get out there, the better. So we can't just rely on low-income housing tax credit projects. We need a whole variety of tools in the toolbox to produce more affordable units. And, the question I just want to make sure that the city is aware of is just how those units will be monitored, who's going to ensure that they're actually being rented to qualified households. The tax credit program is pretty heavily regulated, so we know what we have to do there, and we have a lot of people looking over us to make sure we're doing it properly. So I just think it needs to be really well thought out. What are the rules going to be so that it's not like occupied by students or, and not just only affordable to those lower income levels, but also occupied by people who actually need the housing.
So the only thing I would add is that one of the goals of our bond programs is to really look for sort of those non-traditional developers that can develop sort of outside the LIHTC model, can develop affordable housing units outside the LIHTC model. Typically, each city or county receives 2 to 3 awards in North Carolina, and so it becomes important to really increase those possibilities with sort of a non-traditional model. And we're thinking about and looking at how we can expand our resources to reach the development community that perhaps is not relying as much on a tax credit project.
Thank you. So for my next question, I'm going to talk about a concept maybe some of you are familiar with, maybe not, but it's becoming a hot idea in the planning world. It's the idea of so-called missing middle housing. And what that is the recognition that many cities essentially only have 2 types of housing that gets built today. You have lower density, single family housing, which in most cities is the only thing that's legal to build in almost all of the land area. And that tends to be the most expensive type of housing that there is, because it consumes a lot of land. It requires, in fact, a certain amount of land per housing unit. So on one end, you have that. Then on the other end, where a different housing type is allowed, you typically see 3, 4, 5-story or more apartment buildings, which are excellent in helping to meet the demand for housing. And many people look for that kind of housing. But that's where the missing comes in, everything in between that. And if you think about older neighborhoods in Raleigh or other cities, you see duplexes, you see triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, accessory dwelling units, this very rich tapestry of housing types that are in between that tend to be inherently more affordable because they're using less land for each housing unit than a standard single-family detached house does. So recently, Raleigh City Council passed an ordinance that made it easier to build those housing types in the city, townhomes, duplexes, and so on. How much can that be a strategy along the New Bern Avenue corridor in providing more housing choices and more affordable options for residents?
The city will soon issue an RFP for scattered site lots that it owns in East Downtown. And that will hopefully achieve some of what you just shared in terms of missing middle housing. We have also received a proposal, and City Council has approved it, to redevelop the Lane Idlewild site. And Raleigh Area Land Trustees was the a winning proposer for that. And so we're looking at about 17 units to be developed on that site. The city, in fact, owns 220 scattered site rental units, many of which are on the corridor or very close to it. And those units rent for households at or below 50% area median income. So we serve a low income target there. And they are comprised of duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes, as well as some single families. So we've got some investment out there on the ground already in Mr. Middle housing types. But with the conveyance of the lots that we own that will be in the RFP, that will create more opportunities right in central downtown for those types of housing.
Yeah, again, I think any kind of, any way that we can get more housing units in the corridor of all different types is great, because you're gonna be able to have all different types of people and income levels and professions and everything, living in the area. We don't, again, DHIC doesn't really develop townhomes or duplexes necessarily. And the one question I have about that is the types of those units is great, the different forms, but are you're talking about ownership or rental? And if it's ownership, if you've just got, a couple of townhouses scattered here and there, kind of usually there's an homeowners association that manages townhomes, and, if they're really small, like who does that? So it does open up some questions if you want things to be well maintained and everything. But again, I think any kind of tools to make it more flexible, to get more units on the ground is really going to be good for the area in general.
I agree, and I think it sort of, refer back to something you talked about at the outset of the panel, Jason, in terms of, Raleigh's vision to grow around transit. That will include, perhaps in station areas, some of these larger projects that might be the density bonus and creating affordable housing opportunities that way. But this kind of gentle density, this sort of missing middle housing, including townhomes, duplexes, this reflects a lot of some of the historic building patterns, particularly inside the Beltline, in neighborhoods and in communities like New Bern. It kind of represents a return to that, which I think is exciting, because it's going to, it creates housing for diverse populations, in terms of income and the space they're looking for. I do though think, we need to recognize that this isn't a panacea. We look at there have been townhomes built in the New Bern Avenue corridor, and I think by, most standard measures, especially those close to downtown, they're not very affordable. So I think in particular that the real sort of key opportunity here is this kind of, duplex, triplex, quadplex housing, those types of attached opportunities to create, some units that are probably smaller in scale and more affordable and will be close to transit and service. Thank you.
So one question that I hear a lot, and it's a really good question, and if anybody's ever attending an event like this that is involving housing affordability, and you don't hear this question, you should ask it. And the question is, well, what do you mean by affordable? Affordable to who? Because there's different definitions for that, and that answer to that question really matters. And what we've heard is that affordability is important, but that it's very important to reach the deeper levels of affordability. So looking at residents, households who make 60% or less, or 50% or less, or even less than that of median income. And you're looking at households working in the restaurant industry, working in retail, and the salaries in this market where the median salary is relatively high, they don't go that far. So we've heard that it's really important to reach those deeper levels of affordability. We've heard that senior housing is a critical need. We've heard that supportive housing is a need. These aren't always easy needs to meet. So what kinds of solutions do you think are most promising for encouraging or creating these particular types of affordable housing?
Well, I think in terms of specialized needs for affordable housing, based upon the analysis we did of the corridor, right? And how median incomes in the region tend to be higher than those in the corridor. So when we talk about, the AMI of the region, it's lower in the corridor. So I think, these lower income, sort of area median income housing levels, like housing at 30% AMI, housing at 50% AMI is really critical. And, it can be difficult to deliver with the existing toolkit and even the proposed toolkit. The density bonus program that we've talked about is more targeted at, what we might call a workforce housing level of, sort of 60% AMI. So I think in terms of solutions, the city's affordable housing bond, which has created a significant amount of resources, the potential for the equity fund that I mentioned earlier, using those resources to enable, for instance, projects taking advantage of the low-income housing tax credit to achieve a deeper level of affordability than they otherwise would through this, sort of using those funds for advanced subsidy, I think is really key because, delivering those deeply affordable units is really important in this market.
Right, to be able to serve households at those lower income levels, it really does take a lot of subsidy, fortunately. So it's kind of a give and take. If you want to really target those deeper income levels, you may not produce as many housing units just because of the level of subsidy that it takes. Construction costs, you've probably heard on the news, are going up from COVID-related reasons, other reasons. So it's not getting any easier to serve the deeper income levels, but the tax credit program, if you're going to be successful in securing that type of funding in this area, you're going to have to do some of that deeper targeting anyway. If one wants some city or Wake County assistance, you're going to have to do that deeper targeting again. So in typical DHIC projects, we're doing it already because that's just kind of the way it goes if you're doing tax credit developments. But I think our Milner Commons, the senior housing that we're doing there, where the existing Milner Memorial Presbyterian Church sits right now, that's a unique partnership with the Presbyterian Church, who we are working with on the Capitol Towers renovation up at the North Hills area. And because of that development, we were able to talk with them about this other opportunity. So I think finding, unique partnerships that help make things a little more affordable to actually construct, because in that case, they're not making us buy the land. They're going to have a long-term land lease with us for just $1,000. So that takes the cost of land out of the equation. So, any kind of creative partnerships that can happen that way can help make it more feasible to do the deeper income targeting levels. There are some programs out there that could potentially lead to having more project-based kind of rental assistance to help serve people at lower income levels. And we do a little bit of that in our typical kind of projects that we do now. But there, potential for more of that if the Raleigh Housing Authority or Wake County Housing Authority would ever be open to kind of doing some project-based rental assistance that can help you serve those deeper income levels.
So the city can offer funding. In addition to the $80 million housing bond, there is also approximately $6.7 million, which we affectionately call the penny tax for housing. that was enacted by council a few years back. We also receive an annual allocation from HUD for development of affordable housing and other purposes. One signature program, the home program, which it's actually increasing and has increased over time, our allocation. So we've got more money than probably we've ever had right now, which is interesting to do just that. Deeper income targeting is clearly needed, and certainly as evidenced by our growing number of households experiencing housing instability and actual homelessness. It's really clear that more units are needed at 0 to 30% income levels. So that's one tool that the city has in its toolbox. I wanted to mention also in talking about preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing. We just recently in June changed our homeowner rehab program to not only target lower income households, but to also prioritize those households based on need, the condition of the property. And so we're really focusing on need. We're actually going to roll out, rather than an ongoing application process, we're going to have application periods so that we can literally prioritize those houses that really need substantial rehabilitation and limited repairs. We lowered our income limit to 50% AMI. So, and it was formerly 80% AMI. So we really are focusing our programs on serving the lower income households in the city. And so that's a tool we have as well.
Thank you. So I want to get to our conversations in person and online for those of you who are joining us online. I have one more question I want to put to the panel. And for this question, I really want to get right to the heart of it. And I want to be blunt about a couple of things. One, that there's some very powerful forces that are leading to this affordability issue that we're dealing with in Raleigh and lots of other similar cities around the country. People are looking to live in places in these cities that are closer to downtown, closer to walkable places. And in Raleigh in particular, we did not make a lot of those places when we were growing rapidly. There's a lot of competition and a lot of demand, and frankly, a lot of change that will be coming to New Bern Avenue and other parts of Raleigh. So I want to be blunt about that, but I also want to be really blunt about the fact that I don't think that the city of Raleigh is going to be happy if, looking back, all we ended up with after this bus rapid transit investment is a lot of displacement, and that existing communities and neighborhoods weren't able to realize the benefits of that transit investment. So, and that's really, to me, what this conversation boils down to in its essence. So looking back, in 10 years, if we're looking back and the changes that have occurred around this investment, what kinds of policies are most important to ensuring that existing residents and communities benefit from these changes, benefit from access to opportunity that transit provides, benefit from new investments, and avoid displacement? What kinds of models from other cities or other work that you've done can help us realize the goal that in 10 years, we're not looking back with some regrets about what's on?
Well, I think that, a couple of things come to mind. I think that throughout this conversation, so many good policies and ideas, have been shared. One of the things I want to reiterate, related to the presentation before this discussion, is the needs of sort of existing homeowners and renters who maybe even if they're not sort of in the market, can be displaced by just sort of rising tax bills and prices and that type, particularly people that are on a fixed income. I think that there, within North Carolina in Wayne County, there are interesting tools available to, sort of provide property tax assistance to people that are on a fixed income. And I think sort of looking at the focused application of some of those tools on a corridor like this is going to be really important. In addition to all the other variety of tools we're talking about, regarding, sort of preservation of housing. I also, this is a forum focused on affordable housing, but I don't think we can lose sight of the fact that, there's also a dimension of displacement that can involve businesses. And, the local stores, restaurants, service providers that give character to neighborhoods, and, sort of reflect the needs of communities in these neighborhoods. If there are no sort of business supports in place, they can affect, they can fall victim to the same market forces that households can. And I think as we think about, sort of anti-displacement and community preservation strategies in the corridor, that is a key piece of the puzzle that shouldn't be lost either. And in order to do that, the Equitable transit-oriented development guidebook that the city has put forth has, sort of initial strategies that I think is part of this new Bern planning process. This is a great opportunity to start to implement those. So both during, construction of the line and thereafter, there are opportunities to preserve the business community and, those key aspects of the community so that they're not lost as well. So I think, those are two things that I would highlight. And also I really like Natalie's idea to think about how to work with the larger corporate businesses, tech businesses in this region and think about what can they contribute to the affordable housing solutions here. We have seen, particularly on the West Coast, but also increasingly in other parts of the country, these tech companies also effectively becoming significant affordable housing developers. And, because they recognize the impacts that, the wages they pay, their presence has on local real estate markets, and are increasingly, sort of looking to do something about that as sort of part of their public face in the community. And I think, there's an opportunity to explore that more here in Raleigh.
I think, a goal that DHIC would have, and just a small example, but in the development of the Milner Commons senior housing development is, just trying to communicate with current residents in the corridor who might be feeling the pressure of displacement or maybe want to move out of a single family home or as they age and whatnot, just to try to get the word out about what we're going to be building and try to, just drum up interest in the people who are already living in the New Bern Avenue corridor and try to help, find them a new place to live that's still in the area if they want to kind of make that move. We're not allowed to kind of restrict lease up or marketing just to a certain geography because there's some fair housing rules that won't allow that. But I think just the communication is key when there's new affordable housing opportunities coming online, and really letting the local community know what's coming so that they can kind of be the first people to get their applications in and learn about the project. That's sort of what we had to do over at Beacon Ridge, the community we did behind the Southeast Raleigh Elementary School and Y. We were not allowed to prioritize a certain zip code or census tract, but we really just tried to get the word out to really encourage people to be ready to get their applications in when it was time if they wanted to live there, since their kids may have been going to school there or maybe they worked close by. So we're just going to try to use some more creative marketing and outreach methods to help avoid some displacement if possible. We're going to try to do that.
And I guess, again, we are not able to, we have to be equitable, and we have to create opportunities for, equality in terms of geography of affordable housing. So I will say that. The other thing is preservation of homeownership in this corridor, I think is very important. And so that is why our product is, our substantial rehab product is very good. It is offered to homeowners in the form of a 5-year forgivable loan. And so, you know, our program goes up to $90,000 right now for substantial repairs to the home with a 10% contingency provision. And so we can make a really serious impact with that program in terms of home ownership for intergenerational wealth, if you will, in a rising market. And, you know, of course, there are other factors that influence that, but that's something we can do. And then once again, the strength of strategic site acquisition, we can influence that and control that. And we have a very good real estate team at the city of Raleigh that is looking for opportunities for that.
Thank you, Lamont. Thanks, everybody. I knew I was going to learn something. I learned more than I thought I would. So this is the part of the evening where I want to turn the focus to y'all. And by y'all, I mean people, we have people joining us online and in person. So everybody's been hearing the same information so far. This is where if you're joining us online, Matt and Jake, who are there with you, are going to facilitate some breakout discussions. I think y'all can decide on the number of groups. It looks like 2 or 3 might be the right number. And the same in person. So we want to have some conversations with you, and then to hear back from you, you know, what you've learned or what kinds of thoughts that you want to make sure that we are hearing as a part of this. So I think online, you can go ahead and start those breakout groups. In person, Craig and Kyle are going to be leading some discussions, and I'm thinking we could set up 2 groups here. We have enough people where I think it'll be a nice kind of informal conversation. So maybe the tables here on this side are one group, and the tables here on this side are the second group. And those of you in the middle, maybe this front table can join this group, and those of you further back can join this group. And if that's confusing, just find a table where some people are talking, and we'll have a conversation.
All right, thanks everyone. Ira is going to split us into 2 groups, I believe. There are, let's see, I think about 14 participants. So we'll have 2 groups of 7. Jake's going to take a group, and I'm going to take a group, and then we have someone to take notes as well. So we'll just hang tight until we are split into our groups, and then we'll get our conversation going. So just hold patient with us, and we'll get that ready in just a second. I see Ira popping on now. Ira, I was just explaining you're going to split us into groups.
A participant has left the meeting.
Hi, everyone. Um, yeah, so I think I'll say, just to give a brief recap, and I'm going to put Sarah on the spot as the note taker for the other team. Before we wind up for the evening, just to give the other breakout room a bit of a sense of what we talked about. We did talk about a lot of things. We talked about, you know, property taxes and aging in place, and all sorts of stuff. But I think ultimately the big theme out of this discussion was about partnerships, and specifically with the businesses in the corridor. So understanding that, it's going to be important for the employees to be able to live in those, in the new housing that we create, and to have help help building more of it than we can do on our own as the city of Raleigh, and also the city of Raleigh partnering with developers. So purchasing land, making the process cheaper. Let me check through my notes here. Yeah, so I think that to me was a theme that came up a lot. And as Helen said a couple times, which I think is very true and hard to hear, it's going to take a lot of will and effort. But that's what we're in for. So I don't know if anyone else from my group wanted to add anything. Otherwise, we'll make Sarah Ellis talk.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I also nominate Kelvin from our group to help because he had some
Sure.
great comments that were spot on. So I can get started anytime he wants to jump in, or Jake, of course. Um, okay, we talked about an interest in both mixed use and mixed income housing developments and the benefits of having something somewhere that you could live, work, and play, but that was accessible to people at all income levels. We also had a discussion about the trade-offs of affordability, understanding that money is limited and that we can provide X amount of units at X period of time for X amount of years. And it's an incredibly difficult decision to make, is what's the right combination of that. So we just mulled over that for a little bit. And then we also talked about development agreements and what those could mean for the future of affordable housing and working with private developers, understanding that, they're going to develop things, but maybe that's a mechanism that could help create a benefit for both the city and the developer rather than just trying to extract a benefit from the developer. I think that was kind of the bulk of it, but did Kelvin or Jake have anything you wanted to add?
You hit it right on. There was also talks about the explanation of some of the density levels and the trade-offs on the corridor for parking. And I was like, instead of getting rid of the parking, can we keep the parking and just change the way that those development deals are made with the city entitlements in terms of a percentage of that development going not for a short period, but goes along with that property long term. I'm not sure if I explained that right.
Yeah, I'll try to paraphrase one of the main takeaways I had, which was, keeping affordability as long as possible, ideally permanently. So the kind of 2 to 5 to 10 years is not enough. And to get there, allowing more density is a tool we can use, and making the expectations clearer, right? So if we can streamline the approval process for folks that agree to a specific, high or reasonable amount of affordable housing, so right, at least 10-20%, somewhere in that range, versus just a couple of units here and there, it's more likely to result in things actually getting built and permanently affordable units being mixed in, within these projects. I think that was another really good point that Kelvin made, was that, the affordable units shouldn't just be all on the first story and they feel, separate and distinct from the others, right? So just being able to mix in even within a single building so that it feels like that everybody's, neighbors in it together, and it's not that there's kind of a designation that's different for the affordability unit. So I really appreciated that idea too. So yeah, that was our group, I think.
Great. Yeah, so we're winding down here. I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank you for suffering through the technology and being patient with me as I tried to fix stuff and make it louder and easier to hear. First time we used our new little robot, so I'm glad it worked as well as it did. And thank you all for spending your time. I do want to say that the next thing we have coming up, so we've sort of divided New Bern Avenue into 3 sections just to make it easier to manage. So we have a whole week of basically open house next week. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We'll have staff in the Tarboro Road Community Center hanging out all day. And so we're welcoming people to come and talk with us and do some activities that we have planned. So if you or anyone you want to know want to come, chat in person, it's basically 9 to 5. I think someone should be there. And Monday night is kind of a little bit of a kickoff event at 7, I want to say. I think all the details are on the project website, which I might find. I don't have them written down in front of me. Maybe Matt can put that link in the chat. So Monday night, there's a sort of an opening presentation, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we'll all be there for people to drop in and talk to us. And we'll be having 2 more of those for the other part of the corridor later in October. And we'll have another workshop like this one, but focused more on biking and walking rather than affordable housing. So be on the lookout for that. You can check the project page. Matt just said we try and post that, all the details there. And I will try and get this recording online as soon as possible. I know Matt's got some emails for the presentation to mail.
Just sent them.
We'll probably put that on the website too for other folks who want to see it. But I just want to thank you again, and I've got a big bunch of notes. I'm sure Sarah's got a big bunch of notes. Yeah, anything else from Matt or Jake before we sign off? Okay, great.
Yeah, just thanks everybody. Have a
Yeah.
great night and look forward to continuing this process with everyone, and really appreciate all your thoughts tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Have a good night.